Hi YouTube, welcome back to Wtf Rc Cars. So, continuing on with the very different TT-02 build. We're going to start moving on to the diffs now, I believe. So, let's get you in for a close-up look and see how we progress. Right, so, first thing it's asking us to do is put some anti-wear grease on these parts. So, we'll get that on. So then we're going to need to assemble these gears. And once you've got that together, it's asking for some anti-wear grease to be placed on the back of these. So once we've got that lot assembled, then we need one of these gears. And again, it's asking for the anti-wear grease on the back of this. So then we're going to want to drop one of them in. Get it sat down properly. Then we're going to drop our gears in. And then because this is going to be the front diff, I'm going to go for some really thick grease. And this is the 1 million. So you kind of have to squeeze this stuff in. Then we're going to want to close it up. Then it wants some more anti-wear grease on the back of this. So we just get a bunch of that grease in there. Then you want to close this up. You've got 4 pegs that will align with the diff. And then we've got 4 of these little screws. And it should give us almost a locked diff, which sounds really weird, but if you've ever drove a touring car, they certainly the RC ones anyway, they do run pretty much spools in the front. And again, these JIS screwdrivers, they do make it so much easier to work on the Tamiya cars, the way they just lock into the screw heads. So you're not risking shearing anything off. And there we have it, an almost solid front diff. Right, let's see what else we've got. Right, so you're going to need the actual diff itself. Then we're going to want some bearing oil on its bearings. And again, with this kit, it does come with the bearings. So then you're going to get your bearings on your diff. And with the RC face that way, we're going to be dropping that in. And then you can just, if you just slowly spin it, you can work a bit of the grease around it. And then if you need to, pop a bit more grease on. Then we're going to be fitting the diff cover. Now on this one, you're not going to be using the screws that the Tamiya kit supply. We're going to actually be using 4 of the little domed edge screws, and these will need thread lock on because they're going into aluminium. So I'm just going to get these started. And you can get the aluminium top covers for these diffs. Really just depends if you want to spend a bit more money, really. There shouldn't be any advantage to running them. But then we just need to get these tightened down. And you shouldn't need to go crazy tight with these because the thread lock is going to hold it anyway. And then just check, make sure it's operating nice and smoothly. And then we're on to the next part. Alright, so moving on. We've got these little sort of olive type things And I believe with these you squish them in sideways and then spin them. So you should just be able to pop them in and spin them round. Next we're going to need to take that part, and then these you can use the normal screws provided with the kit. So basically all we're going to do is just quickly screw these down, and it is going to be interesting to see what steps change on this because we've got the carbon. Now you need to put a little bit of grease on the end of these, and you have the stops facing backward. Then you want to slide that in place, and then we've just got 2 more screws to fit into this. So basically got 1 at each side at front, and that's what you should end up with. So we'll get these screwed in and then see what else we've got. Now moving on to the rear diff, the only thing I've done different on this one, it's going to be having 100,000 diff oil in, not 1 million, because I want some diff action on this, but I've tried 500,000. Sorry, I've tried 50,000 in one, and that seemed a little bit sort of not enough. But that should be enough to work its way around. And then again, we're going to be closing this up, and it's just same as the front one. We're just going to use 4 of these little tiny screws. So I'll get that one closed up and then see what else we've got. Alright, so moving on, we want some oil on his bearings and get his little bearing snapped into place. And we want to drop that in, work his diff grease around a little bit, and then if it needs any more we can just put a little bit on, make sure that's nice and greased up. Then we're going to close this up with the standard part, but again same as the front, we're going to be using the little button head screws that came with the chassis kit. So we're going to need to get all 4 of these in. And then you just want to screw these down. Once these are screwed down, let's see what we've got next. So moving along, we want that bit fastened down on there with 2 little screws. And again, these are the screws that come with the actual kit itself, because we're going into kit plastic parts. So quickly get these screwed down, and once you've got these mounted into place, you want to fit your arms. Now if you go in short wheelbase, you have the taper pointing forward, or long wheelbase, you have it pointing backwards, and you want to grease the ends of your arms. Just so it makes your suspension nice and free. Then we're going to slide this part over, and then just like on the front, we've got the 2 little screws that just go into end, and these tighten your shock mounts up. So that's basically how we're going to end up with it, and we just need to tighten these screws up. So I'll get them done and see what else we've got. So the next thing it's asking us to do is to fit his motor, but we're not going to use our screws that come with the actual kit or this kit. We're going to use the screws that come with his Wtf Racing. And just looking at these, looks like it's going to be the longer of the screws. Now unlike the original chassis, this is really easy to fit your motor on the adjustable motor mount, because we have got really easy access now to the motor itself. So just get your washer on with 1 little screw, and then you can line the bottom screw up. Then you just need to line the bottom screw up, and you can get the bottom screw almost fully tight. And then if we just back the top screw out slightly, we can still move it. Now for this one, just to test it, I'm going to go with the, because we're running the high-speed gearing and the track is going to be quite short, so I'm going to try a 23 tooth pinion on this and see how we get on with that. So if we just start to line it up, we can then get a grub screw fastened down. And I must admit, this chassis is a whole lot easier than doing it on the stock chassis. So then we just need to set our pinion spacing. So I like to have a really slight bit of play. So that's too tight. And if you just rotate it all the way around, make sure you've got the same play all the way around, and then you can tighten your screws up. So just nip the bottom one up, then nip the top one up. Make sure you've still got your very slight bit of play. And there we have it. That's the motor mounted. And then, because this is the drift kit, it does come with the heatsink. These can be a little awkward to put on sometimes, but you just have to sort of open them up slightly and they should go on. And just make sure your heatsink's not going to be fouling your drive shaft. But yeah, that's the original Tamiya motor heatsink. And the colours of the racing parts and the colour of this chassis, it does match pretty well. Right, let's see what else we've got. Right, so for this part we're going to be putting the arms on, and I now know why it's got that gap under the rear of the hubs. So we're going to need that one screw out. We're going to put these into place, and again, depends if you want long or short wheelbase. Then you've got this part that we're going to have to slide in. And then you can put your center screw back, and that'll pinch everything together and stop your rear arms from coming off. So we've got all them in. Let's see what else it's got in store for us. So because this chassis doesn't use the rear bumper, so to fix this in place, we've then got a couple of screws, and these come with the actual chassis kit itself. So you're going to want to get them in with a little bit of thread lock, and then just carefully screw these into the back of the bulkhead. So we can just tighten that down, and then that's got that all nice and fastened up. So there's a whole bunch of the kit screws that you're not going to need to use. Now, depending on what you're going to use to top this, you could use that to top it. So if we spin that, it's going to match up perfectly and hold the bumper down. Or you can top that with one of the aluminium or plastic ones, and you could get yourself some more nuts and bolts and make a rear bumper out of that one. But let's crack on, see what else we've got. Right, for this part, looks like we're going to have to drop this front bumper off. And as I said, the instructions that it comes with, they kind of sort of take it for granted that you're adding this to an RC and not building one from scratch. So there's a few of the steps that are a little bit sort of either confusing or not exactly in the order that you'd expect to be building it. which I'm guessing it's why it told us to put the third screw in the middle on this part, because we're going to have to drop that out as well. Got a bit more thread lock to put on that. So we're going to have to get some grease on the end of his arms. So I'll quickly get all this on. So once you've got the grease on the arms, we can put these into place. And you want the Tamiya logo facing away from the vehicle. Then we're going to have to slide that into place. Then we can put a center screw back. Then you're going to need 2 little button screws, and these are going to go into the end of the suspension bracket and straight into the bulkhead. And again, these little button screws are the ones that come with the chassis kit. So you're going to want a little bit of thread lock on these because they are going into aluminium. So that's got a suspension arms on. Then we can pop the little olives in. Now, I did on the other TT-02 that I built, I did buy the low friction ones of these, but I'm not exactly sure if there's any advantage to it. And they did seem to have a bit of slop in them. So I'm just wondering if I'm going to try building the kit with these stock parts and see if we have as much sort of slop in the steering, because they did seem to be quite a lot of sort of slop and play once I fitted the metal ones, and I'm not sure if they're the cause or because I didn't fit the, you can get the low friction kingpins as well, but I didn't fit them. I just used these stock parts. So I'm going to try this completely stock, see what it's like for play wise, see if they actually wear really quickly or anything, because they're not a difficult part to get out of, and they're not a difficult part to swap out. But that should give us our front and rear suspension arms fitted, as motors now are in. So let's see what other joys we have. Right, so moving along, we are going to use the Wtf Racing. So these are the TT-02 017, and these are the steel output cups. So we need to get them in. Then we're going to get one of his hubs. We're going to drop a bearing in. And I'm going to try and keep the plastic hubs because I've not broken one yet. Famous last words I know, but up to now we've not had one break. So I'm going to stick with it. So we're going to need to get them in place. Then we are using the Wtf Racing sprung steel drive shafts. And these are TT-02 015 SP. So we're going to get these in. Then we've got to get the drive shaft in place. And then this little cup goes on the bottom. So it's the A8 part and it faces down. Then we need to line that up. Then we drop that over the top. And we got that little cap that goes on. Then we need to get a screw in. And with these, you're just tightening them down to take the play out of it. You're not trying to pinch it up so tight, because this will stop your steering from moving if you over tighten it. So you just want to tighten them down just to make it snug. Then on the bottom, we have the sort of little black washer. Then again, we're just going to screw that in. And the reason I run with these drive shafts is I have yet to have one break, and the stock drive shafts just literally pop out constantly. So quickly do exactly the same on the other side. That's what we should end up with. And we've got a steering, got a suspension, and we've got us front hubs all assembled. So let's carry on. So we're using the exact same hubs as we've used on the other cars. So these are the Wtf Racing TT-02 0072BU. These are the 2-degree rear towing, and basically you want them fitted with the numbers facing backward, and that'll give you your 2-degree toe in on the rear. So we'll get us bearings fitted in this, and we've already popped a bit of oil in these. See if I can get this inside one to go in straight. Yep, there we are. And we're using the same sprung steel drive shafts, so we'll get them into place, and then you want to hold them in with one of the pins, and the pins need a bit of grease on them, just a little fiddly to line up, and then you can close them up with the pin through the top. So exactly the same on the opposite side, and then we just need to tighten these 4 down, and that's your 2-degree rear towing rear hubs. So let's crack on. Right, next thing it's asking us to do is put the little ball adapters on for the suspension. Now it tells us to go for the inner position on the top, both front and back, and the higher position on the lower arms. So I'm going to get them done front and rear. We might end up moving them depending on how the chassis sits, but let's get them tightened up. So that's got us shock mounts in the stock position that it's asking us to put them in. Now on some of the kits I've ended up dropping them to lower and moving them out a bit just to get the ride height down, but let's move on to the shocks. So these are the lovely shocks we're going with. So it's a bit of a order to put these in. So what I tend to do is put a little bit of oil on this O-ring and drop it inside. So you just have to carefully work it round until it pops into the little recess. Then that's going to screw onto your shock body, and I just find putting a little drop of oil in it just makes it a lot easier. So we can get that screwed all the way on. Once you've got that all the way on, you need to assemble the actual shock itself. So we've got some O-ring grease, just find this stuff just stops you ripping them basically, and it kind of makes them a bit more leak proof. So we want the O-ring in first, then you want a spacer, then you want the guide for the actual shock, and you have the little sort of bump facing down. Then we need to screw this into place, and what I tend to do is not screw that all the way down because I don't want to squash the actual piston yet. Then we've got to get one of our little shock shafts, we've got to get this little clip on. Then you need to choose which one of these dampers you're going with, and for this one I'm just using the standard 3-hole. Get that into place, and we got to get another of these lovely little clips, and with these you just need to work them around until you get them clipped all the way in, because they will kind of clip, but then they've got a little sort of bit that sticks out the back. So once we've got that on, you can place it into your shock, and you just want to carefully screw it through, and you will find it screwing its way through the actual O-ring. Then we can tighten the shock shaft up. So we got that on the bottom. Then we need to get our little eyelet on the bottom of it, and you can make your life a whole lot easier with some shock pliers on these, and then you shouldn't damage or scratch up your shock shaft. So once you've got that screwed on, before we put the springs and everything on, you need to get it filled. So I'm just going to use the shock oil that comes with these shocks. We'll see what it works like. So I like to get them filled, and then if you move them through the actual motion a good 4 or 5 times, and then we just need to let it sit till the bubbles come to the top. So I'll get the rest of them built up to this point. Right, so once we've got the air bled out of them, we're going to top the shocks off. Then we're going to place the oil bladder on top. Then you want one of these little sort of neoprene things sat in the top of them, and you want to try and get that as central as possible. Then we take one at shock caps and you put one at lids in it, and then we're going to screw this on. And don't worry if you get a bit of shock oil come out, at least you know you've not got any air trapped in it at that point. So you then want to screw that down. You can wipe any excess oil off, and then we just need to make sure we've got the shock bottoms screwed all the way on. Then we got to choose whether this is going to be a front or rear one, and for me I'm going to have these set up on the rear. So this is going to be one of the rear ones, and I'm using one of the red super soft springs for the rear because I want to try and get more grip across the rear end of RC. And also, depending on where you want your sort of static sag to be, it depends whether you want to close it up with the piston all the way out or all the way in or half way out. I'm going to try these all the way out. So that's one of them built. I'm going to build the other 3, and the only difference will be the front ones are going for the green or greeny blue sort of tint. So they're going to be slightly harder shocks, and the reds going with the super soft, just so I'm trying to get a bit more grip across the rear of the RC. So let's get these built up. These shocks should fit on the stock Tamiya. They are the Racing titanium coated shocks. So I'm going for the slightly harder shocks on the front. And looking at these stock positions, it looks like they're going to go on. So they are going to be a little bit stiff to get on, but they do go. So let's get them on the stock position. I know when I fitted the fast track shocks on the other TT-02, I kind of had to mess around moving all the shock positions to get the ride height, but these definitely look like they're going to sit nice and low. So I've used the shorter of the 2 ends, what you get for these shocks. And it does look like that's going to let me dial in the correct ride height. because I like to have these cars as low as possible, because on the track what we go, it's really grippy, and if not, you tend to get grip roll. And if there's cars barreling down track upside down, it's not winning races. But all we need to do now is set the actual shocks, so we can wind us preload down. Then we can get the shocks to where we want the RC to sit. It's just a case of dialing them in. But at least with these, as opposed to the fast track shocks that I fitted, these do come with the shorter bottoms that allow you to use the stock actual suspension positions on the TT-02s, and it does let you drop the ride height to somewhat more useful for a track. I think the fast tracks ones are absolutely fine if you're wanting to build one of the more sort of rally inspired TT-02s, but I certainly think these racing ones definitely more suited to if you're going to build it for indoor carpet, and they do look nicer, to be totally honest. They do feel really, really smooth. So purely in the interest of keeping these videos under an hour, we're going to call it a day there. So that's the second part of the build. Quite enjoyed it so far, and if you're interested in what else we're going to do with this, don't forget to like and subscribe, hit the notification bell, share to friends and family, and I'll catch you guys again in the next one.